Responding to a call for somebody like this who's on the run, she's trying to call in for backup. What, are your feelings on that as she's just responding to this tip that somebody saw Markieth Loyd in the Walmart and she's trying to respond to this and get some help? So, how obviously we saw how dangerous that was in this case.
Certainly, he had been at large for several weeks after the killing of his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Sade, and their child. Well, she was pregnant, don't know if it was his child or not. But the fact that he was at large for that murder and used a weapon, the likelihood of him having a weapon again was very high. And the fact that she knew and recognized who he was, she did the proper protocol. She called for backup. She called in for the emergency system to let them know, alerted them of a possible murder suspect using a dispatch code of 10-5. So everybody was aware. Help was on the way to help support her in the apprehension of him to ensure it was him. So when she attempted to stop him, when she saw he was leaving and called out for him to stop, and then he retaliated, we had a witness come up earlier showing that he actually did fire upon her. Scariest thing ever for a police officer.
While we wait for Captain Carter to come in to testify, I want to bring our guests back in to talk about what we just heard. And I'm going to recap what we just heard. And it was very sad testimony. Officer Thornton was very matter of fact in his testimony, but he described coming to the scene at that Walmart and finding Lieutenant Clayton lying on the ground, suffering from a gunshot wound, and she was trying to breathe. Lisa, I want to start with you as a former law enforcement officer. That is awful to hear. And for her husband, I guess he's sitting in the courtroom to be listening to this. My goodness, it's really, really sad to listen to this woman going out and doing her job and getting shot like that.
Yes, in law enforcement, it's a family, it's a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and watching one of your own suffer and not being able to do anything in that moment it is horrific. And the first thing that you want to do is make sure that the area is safe, nobody else is going to be hurt, and apprehend the person that's involved in this. So it is the worst, and hearing it firsthand right now, I'm sure is very heart-wrenching for the family.
Yeah, Lisa, it's my understanding she was calling for backup. What are your thoughts on that? That she responded to this call about Kim possibly being there by herself. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It all happens so quickly. You see somebody, you believe they're a suspect for a murder. She did call in and do the proper protocol. And then she's starting to lose sight of the individual and not wanting the
Hmm.
individual to get away. So her job would be to have a confrontation. The best scenario is to have a backup police officer. I was in patrol and I was in a single person unit, so I didn't have a partner all the time. And when you're in the moment and you know somebody is wanted for murder and could potentially hurt and
Hmm.
kill somebody else, you do act. And she did.
And that was Antoine Thomas, who lived in an apartment complex, describing how he saw a man with a gun, being Markieth Loyd, after he fled from shooting Lieutenant Debra Clayton, and Markieth Loyd stole his car. So let's bring Lisa Lockwood back in to discuss this. Lisa, it seems pretty obvious they're trying to paint a picture here. The prosecution is of, look, this is a dangerous guy who took steps to flee, very specific steps after he shot Debra Clayton. He tried to kill another police officer, and then he carjacks this guy who can clearly identify Markieth Loyd as the man who did all of this.
Yes, and what I take from this is we have two individuals who were accosted by Markeith who were extremely courageous. The police officer who was fired upon and then went into reverse in order to get cover. And now this individual took his car, had a gun to his face, and decided to throw the keys in the air to give him some time to actually run away from him. And he actually questioned him, saying, "Are you for real?" So, yeah, very, very courageous. I was astonished by that. And, the fact that he allowed himself that little bit of leeway of getting away from him and not being shot by throwing the keys up in the air. I would never recommend that for anybody else, but it worked for him.
Yeah, it seems like, the defense attorney is trying to find just any little thing that he can kind of pick at there and try to call this gentleman's account into question. How important is this witness's testimony in your estimation to kind of painting the picture as far as the prosecution goes about what happened that night and about what Lloyd's state of mind was at that point in time.
With an insanity plea, we're looking at the potential of somebody not knowing what they're doing. And here's somebody who's clearly trying to get away. He shot somebody. He had already murdered his ex-girlfriend. He shot a police officer who attempted to stop him repeatedly, went upon her while she was on the ground and continued to fire. He escaped that scene with other police officers in pursuit, went into a private apartment area. Another police officer with lights and sirens attempts to stop him. He fires on that officer and then goes ahead and still tries to get away in another vehicle and attempts another armed robbery. Somebody who knows what they're doing is wrong if they're trying to escape. So I just have a difficult time with the insanity plea and do think that this is the last-ditch effort.
And that was a Walmart employee, Monica Pridgeon, and she was there when Lieutenant Clayton was wounded, when she was shot by Markieth Loyd. And you could see that her face was blurred. She didn't want to be shown, so the judge allowed her to testify without being filmed. She didn't want to be on television. She didn't want her face shown. So she's recounting seeing this shooting. So very, very sad. We've heard a number of people talk about this today, and it's just really heartbreaking and hard to listen to. So, Lisa, let's bring Lisa Lockwood back in. Lisa, what do you think about this woman testifying? She's explaining, she's working, she's sitting there watching this unfold, and she's explaining exactly what she saw as the lieutenant was shot.
Yes, and remember I talked about earlier the camaraderie of law enforcement and the brother and sisterhood. The employees at Walmart knew this lieutenant, knew this officer. They joked with her. She worked security. She helped them on numerous cases. It was part of her community. So not only is she witnessing something like this happen, it's not a stranger. It feels an extension of her, a part of her family, and feeling a sense of helplessness watching as it's unfolded. The multiple gunshots that this police officer took, and then going to the scene when she felt it was safe enough for her to go to this officer and then attempt to render aid and talk to her and see if she was okay. And it was brutal to watch that, to know that she was there and witnessed her demise.
And that was the defense attorney for Markieth Loyd on cross-examination, obviously trying to call this woman's testimony into question because it was some pretty upsetting testimony, how she talked about Lieutenant Clayton being shot. Not much you can really do with this witness, though. Just briefly, we have about 20 seconds left, Lisa. I don't see what he really does with this witness on cross.
No, I mean, all he probably wanted to do is to try to say one or two things. He's pleading insanity, so it's almost as if we know our client did this, but to be sure that she recognized that individual, the person that is in court, is that person who did the shooting.